Thanks so much, Bob. It's good to see that you've chosen the superior city for the conference this year in Melbourne. Oh, come on, I had to get it in. Come on. I know some of you from Sydney. So as Bob mentioned, the question is, what policy levers will the Australian government be using to ensure the conditional growth of international tourism? All very well, as Bob mentioned, for us to be doing our part in terms of our businesses, but we need leadership from the top. Now, the Honourable Stephen Ciobo was sworn in as the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment in July in 2016, and this is Mr Ciobo's third frontbench role in the Foreign Affairs and Trade portfolio. He's previously served as the Minister for International Development and the Pacific and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Trade and Investment. Can you please welcome the Honourable Stephen Ciobo?
Well, good morning to all of you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to come along and speak. Bob, can I thank you? I'm not sure if someone was at the back of the room saying stretch it out, but you did very well. Sorry I was 4 or 5 minutes late. John, to you and the team from Tourism Australia, it's great to be with you all again. And to all of you, you are the ones that power Australia's tourism industry. I want to thank you and express our sincere gratitude for all of you for the outstanding work you've been doing over the past 12 months. We are starting to see some very strong results off the back of the efforts that are being made by all of you as practitioners, as those at the coalface, together with the support that we're providing to Tourism Australia, and the efforts and stewardship of John and the board at Tourism Australia. I think we can all say that Australia's tourism industry is going through a particularly strong growth phase at the moment. That's not to say that it's even across the board. That's not to say that there aren't areas that we can continue to improve and to work on, but certainly the results that have come out over the past 12 months, as was released yesterday in the IBS study, show that the industry is experiencing very strong growth. And I talk about the records, how as a coalition government we're providing record funding for Tourism Australia, and we are seeing a record number of tourists staying for a record length of time and spending a record amount of money. And that's a pretty good outcome to achieve. I'm not going to say that that's all happened since I became Tourism Minister, because that sets a pretty high benchmark, and that means there's only one way to go from here in terms of politics. But what I want to make sure that we do is continue to invest in the industry, to continue to provide you with the tools that you need, but also to continue to focus on future growth markets where we know we're able to achieve more success for Australia's tourism industry. For me, coming from the Gold Coast and as someone who's got a tourism background, it's part of the personal compact that I have with the industry. We've seen really strong growth from a number of key markets, not least of which has been, of course, our most valuable tourism segment, the China market. Last year, 2017, was the year of international tourism between Australia and China. The Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, together with President Xi, had the vision to be able to drive this and capitalise on this as an initiative between our two countries. And now we see $10.4 billion of spend from international inbound Chinese tourists. And I seem to have, on a week-to-week basis, a summary that says either China's in front or New Zealand's in front, is at 1.3, is at 1.33 million. Whatever the number is, it ebbs and flows. But what is clear is that there still remains incredible potential from China. 1.3 million out of a population of about 1.3 billion represents a fairly modest take of the long-haul international traveller market. I know that John and the board are very focused on making sure we continue to increase that. And when you contrast that with New Zealand, with its relatively modest population and a similar number of tourists, you can see that there is huge potential. But likewise, I was particularly excited when John came to me with his vision around the new Dundee campaign. And I want to applaud John, you and the board, for the stewardship that you had on that Dundee campaign. It has been an outstanding success, everyone. I've seen the metrics that have come back. For what is a relatively reasonable investment of $36 million over 2 years, they were able to either twist the arms of or entice Russell Crowe, Hugh Jackman, Margot Robbie, of course Danny McBride to spearhead it, and the friend of Tourism Australia's Chris Hemsworth to headline what has been an incredibly successful campaign in North America. Now ultimately the proof of the pudding will be in the tasting, and we'll see what happens in terms of forward bookings. But I know from conversations that I have had with a number of those in the industry that the forward bookings look good, and certainly the level of inquiry has had a very significant spike in interest. So if we're able to capitalise on the more than 700 million social media hits, about 75% of which came from North America, if we can capitalise on the fact that there's been more than $80 million worth of advertising equivalent news coverage, then you can start to see why that presents huge potential. At $3.8 billion, the North American market is an important market to us. But our goal and aspiration is to increase that to $6 billion by 2020. So I guess in essence, the core part of the message that I want to leave you with today is to speak about how Tourism Australia and I are very focused on making sure we continue growth. And that's not to the exclusion of traditional markets. We continue to work on, for example, working holiday makers from Europe. We continue to put focus on markets like Japan. But it is to say that we have real potential to grow, in particular, those two markets. One of the things I also wanted to discuss with you today was opportunities that present themselves with business events. Those of you who I've known for some time would know I've always been passionate about this as a sector. We know that a business events traveller spends on average twice the amount that a leisure traveller spends. Leisure travellers spend at around roughly $90 per day on average. A business traveller around $165 per day. And it's difficult to get the actual data we need on business events travellers. Business events travellers, we know, spend somewhere in the range of $14 to $28 billion. And I question, surely we can get better numbers than that. But I'm told, no, that's about as accurate as we can get. So I want to talk to Tourism Australia and Tourism Research Australia through Austrade about how we can put more effort around actually capturing the data we need around business events. But irrespective, whether it's 14 billion or 28 billion, the impact of business events to this country is significant, and I'm determined to make sure that it continues to grow. So I'm very pleased today to launch a new Boosting Business Events bid fund that will be administered by Tourism Australia. This will see an investment of taxpayers' dollars of around $12 million over the next 3 years to support and assist our business events sector to continue to grow this sector of the industry. I believe with this money, and it's the first time in Australia's history that the federal government has supported business events in this way, but I firmly believe that with this investment of taxpayer funds, we can ramp up our involvement in business events and attract more significant business events and, more importantly, greater numbers of business events to Australia. For those of you that are purely in the leisure space, it's good news too. Because although you may not directly be the beneficiary of new business events, what we know is that business events travellers tend to stay a little longer as well. And if we can boost it by having their partners come or family members come, then there'll be the additional spin-off benefits that flow into the leisure market as well. So this investment of $12 million will be administered by Tourism Australia. Their business events unit will have responsibility of working together closely with industry. I also want to particularly thank those in the business events space, AACB, Becca and others, who all play a critical role in helping to shape what Tourism Australia is going to execute, and having discussed with me for quite some time now about how we can boost this segment of the industry. So in summary, ladies and gentlemen, we've seen over the last 12 months a 6% increase in expenditure by international tourists into this country. They're at record numbers. That 6% increase represents an additional $2.2 billion that's flowing into the Australian economy in the tourism sector. Together with the other whole of government approach that we have around tourism, what we've done in terms of multiple entry visas, longer term visas, being able to apply for visas in language other than English, and never forget the fundamental importance of making sure that we are, what is often not spoken about, but widely understood, perceived to be a safe country, as being critical, especially in these times, to continuing to drive interest and also aspiration in Australia. Because the key to making sure that that aspiration becomes conversion to actual travel is people knowing that it's safe to go. And as a government, we have been obviously very focused on making sure that our border integrity measures, together with the work of our various domestic agencies, have placed Australia in a position where we are one of the few countries that people know is safe to visit. And that is especially critical in the business events space. So an extra $2.2 billion funding that's flying for Tourism Australia, the great work that you're all doing, especially around innovation in terms of your marketing effort, the new Dundee campaign in North America, plus the great success that we've achieved with China over the past 12 months, I believe paints a very good picture for the future of Australia's tourism industry, together with new investment attractions in terms of new hotel product and investment in product more broadly across the tourism landscape. I'm very confident that we will have another stellar 12 months of Australia's tourism industry, and it is indeed my immense privilege and pleasure to be Tourism Minister and to continue to sell Australia around the world. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Minister. Thank you so much, Minister. That's not every day that we hear that a department's going to be getting $12 million, so that's very exciting news. It now makes sense. I did not know that the Minister was from the Gold Coast. It now makes sense why he might have had a little say in the Logies going up there this year. Poor old Melbourne has missed out. But thank you, Minister, for making time in your very busy schedule. I think he may even have a doorstop, out the front straight away, so we're very lucky that he's fitted us in today.